The internet is a big, amazing, and complicated space where people build community, can create anything they can imagine, and make connections all around the world. I'm John Starr, advisor at Thorn, and this is Safe Space, a podcast about the people working behind the scenes to protect millions of users every day. These are the leaders of trust and safety, their stories, their journeys, and what fuels their mission to build a safer internet for all of us. I'm excited to welcome Del Harvey to the Safe Space podcast today. Del is an advisor, public speaker, and coach for trust and safety leaders. You may know her as the founder and leader of the trust and safety team at Twitter for over a decade. I had the privilege of working under Del's leadership for 6+ years of that time. Del's been an incredible defining figure in my career and journey through trust and safety, and I'm incredibly grateful for her taking some time out of her day to join us. Del, welcome to Safe Space. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I get excited anytime people want to talk about trust and safety and they're actually going to listen and like enjoy the conversation. So I really seek out those moments.
So Del, we are a podcast about journeys to and through trust and safety. Would love to spend some time on your entry point into the field. Where did things start for you?
You know, the clearest thing I could say is that at no point in my career have I ever had a handle on what I was going to be doing next. And I think I've really thrived in that. I technically, I suppose my draw to trust and safety began with my first job, which was as a lifeguard. And I spent a couple summers lifeguarding at a community pool and then wanted something that was a little more challenging. And I saw that a nearby mental institution was hiring lifeguards for the upcoming summer. So then I spent a summer lifeguarding at a level 3 state mental institution, which was actually a really wildly pivotal point in a lot of my thinking, because it was an opportunity for me when I'm in the middle of like teenage angst and, woe is me, to see these people who had been dealt such terrible hands in life and had these things happen to them that were often entirely out of their control. And they were going to spend the rest of their lives, most likely in this kind of institution, or if they are lucky, maybe a group care home. And it was really a pivotal moment for me because I saw how many of the kids that were there had backgrounds where they had been really badly abused or mistreated or just really undergone these horrible events. And I was like, I want to do something to try to help. And the I want to do something to try to help was what took me to a lot of the jobs that I then had after that. And I had a whole bunch of different jobs, like so many. I was a paralegal for an attorney who specialized in domestic violence cases. She did a lot of pro bono work. It was really cool. I was an assistant for autistic kids at one point. I did rigging electrics and theater. I worked at a pharmacy counting pills and dispensing medication. I worked at National Tire and Battery. I can totally install a tire if I need to. I've never needed to, but I could. And found my way eventually I stumbled across this website one day. I was using the old site Stumble Upon, which used to literally give you random sites to go to that were in a given topic. So I stumbled upon this site, and there were people who were essentially going out into chat rooms and pretending to be kids. And if adults solicited them, they would post the chat log publicly and try to sort of name and shame them. My initial reaction was, okay, but why aren't you working with law enforcement isn't going to listen to us. We're civilians. And I was young and full of energy and joie de vivre. I was like, hey, if I can get law enforcement to work with us, will you work with law enforcement? I said, sure, absolutely. And to this day, I feel a deep sense of empathy and sympathy, really, for the poor sheriff in Illinois, as I recall, who was the recipient of my phone call, because it must have been like a golden retriever puppy on the phone. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to work with you. I've got this, I've got the protocols we're going to use. And this is what I'm thinking. I have this guy who's done this. And he was, wait, sorry, what? What happened? What now? But they looked through it. They signed off on it. They ended up setting up a sting operation at the Blockbuster that the guy said he wanted to meet the girl at, and they arrested him. And he ended up being prosecuted, going to jail, getting sex offender registration, and so on. And I spent about 5 years doing that and helping build the law enforcement relationships that the site had and really expand. I think we ended up with over 300 convictions by the time that
Wow.
I left. So I took what I think is a pretty logical next step and spent a year administering psychological testing to reality TV show applicants to make sure they wouldn't be a danger to themselves or others if cast, as one does. And then, I didn't want to do that long term. It was fascinating. I learned a ton from it, but I didn't want to do it long term. And a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, I'm working at this startup up in San Francisco, and we're starting to see spam every now and then. When I think about bad things on the internet, I think of you." And I was like,
Mm.
well, first, not loving the personal brand, but second, that does sound kind of interesting. I'll check it out. So I did. And then as I started, I realized that there were going to be a lot more challenges than just spam at this little site called Twitter. Even though when I sat down and talked to the founders, they were like, we're not that worried about spam because it's never going to be that big of a problem because you choose who you follow.
Mm.
And I was like, you sweet summer children. That must be such a nice world you're living in where you have that thought. There's going to be so much stuff. So I don't think there was ever a point in time when I was like, I know when I grow up, I'm going to become founder of trust and safety at Twitter. Like what? None of those words existed, right? I mean, they existed. Some of them existed, but they didn't have the same meaning.
Right.
And I think one of the most important takeaways that I've had is that actually all of those jobs, all of those very scattered learnings and preparation and the like has served me in such good stead in trust and safety when odd situations have come up or something's been, all of a sudden I'm like, wait, you know what? This one time back when I was sorting books at Barnes and Noble, I needed to do this thing and this is how I did it. I think it was pretty straightforward, John.
I've heard a version of that story a few times, and it really never gets old.
Give it like 5 more times.
I
It'll
I,
get
lo-
old.
I love I love the frame of trying to help, and I have a feeling it's going to come up a few times more in our conversation. And I have to say, you're up there when I think about bad things on the internet in terms of the first couple things that come to mind. So that person wasn't entirely wrong, and maybe a bit of a visionary at the same time. So when
I
you,
will say though,
yeah,
John,
yep,
that a little later when Biz introduced me to the folks who were the very nascent beginnings of Thorn. So it was back when it was DNA
yep.
Foundation. And as they were just starting to spin that up, Biz sent a very similar email that said, you know what you need? When I think of child sexual exploitation,
Oh
I think of
God.
Del Harvey. She's the person for you. And I was like, okay, really? We need to work on the phrasing here. Can we add in a combating? Can we add in a
Right. Countering.
this is not ideal?
Fun fact is, Dell introduced me to Thorn when I started at Twitter. And we all know how that story has gone. When your journey to a field that, I think to your point, didn't really exist at certainly at the scale and speed that it does today, or the commonality or normalization of the field, what were those first couple of years like? What was a day in the life for Del Harvey in the early days at Twitter?
Pretty much wake up, log on, do all the tickets that had come in, all the reports, which like normally I had back in the beginning, like, I could have up to 100 a day sometimes in some of
Watch
these
out.
queues, which like, whew, it kept being that like things would come up. You know how at like a lot of startups, there can be turf wars where people start getting really possessive of their areas, like don't want
Mm.
anybody near it. I had kind of the opposite challenge. I had people coming by to give me turf. They're like, "Hey, we found something terrible. It seems
We
like
thought
it
of
should
you.
go in your org."
Right.
Yes, exactly. So, and I brought some of it upon myself. I
Mm.
remember I had a conversation with Biz at one point where I was like, "What are you guys thinking about doing in terms of trademark?" And
Mm.
Biz looked at me, and Biz has always been mildly terrified of me and has admitted this publicly. I actually love Biz, but it's fine.
Yep.
I'm used to it. And So he's looking at me, he's really trying to figure out what the right answer is. He's like, "We've applied for one on Twitter." I'm like, Great. Like, I think that's a good call, but I meant, like, other people's trademarks." And he looks at me, he's really like, he is you can tell he is
Mhm.
working his heart, and he goes, "We're not going to use them." Now, so also an excellent choice, Biz, but I actually meant, what are you going to do about people using other people's trademarks on Twitter? He goes, "Why would they do that?" And I was like, "Okay, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and work on a trademark policy to go along with the other policies, and we're just gonna keep going." And we had a lot of things like that. And
Yeah.
I remember about probably 8 months after I started, I was walking down the hall and I saw Ev, and Ev was like, "Gosh, Del, you look tired. You should hire somebody to help." And I was like, I didn't know that was an option, actually. I would enjoy that very much. Go on, tell me more. And then I
Mhm.
started hiring the first folks and started building the team. And one of the things that I have always tried to do is make sure I hire people who know more than I do about the stuff they're working on. I very much enjoy that. I would love it if the people who are running areas under me are subject matter experts in those areas, and then I don't have to be a subject matter expert in all of the areas. So I hired a bunch of really great people over the years, you included, and I was really lucky. It was a really amazing opportunity to try to build a trust and safety org the way that I thought it should be built, and to do and prioritize the things that thought should be done as much as possible.
Love that. So you referenced a few maybe we'll call them PG rated oh no moments with respect to trademark and potentially spam. So let's maybe go to like aha moments. So at any point or at what point in your journey did you think, oh wow, Twitter is something else, something larger? And then also at what point did the concept of trust and safety for you start to take on maybe a different shape and size because of the speed and scale and the relevancy, quite frankly, of a platform like Twitter?
I think that the most consistent aha moment that I had, and I had it regularly, once I was about 2 years in, I would find myself in these situations where I would be like, "Oh my gosh, this seems like an insurmountable challenge." Like,
Mm,
"Hey, design how the country withheld content system should work for the world, and what kinds of legal requests are we going to comply with, and in what situations, and like, what a huge
right.
ginormous task." And I would find myself going, "Gosh, remember 2 years ago when all I had to deal with was
Mhm,
X, Y, and Z? What a time.
mm.
What a simpler time." And every couple of years I'd have that again where I'd be like, "My gosh, think about how much easier it used to be." So I had a lot of kind of aha moments of like, "Oh, this is continuing to scale. This is continuing to grow. There is more to this." We added more and more teams into trust and safety, at least at Twitter. And we had really a wide spanning set of teams that covered a ton of areas. And was working pretty, like, increasingly effectively. We were making real progress, and we struggled in a lot of ways with talking about our efforts, what we were doing, why we should prioritize them, why we wanted to invest in not just responding to things that had gone wrong,
Mm.
but into trying to intervene before they go wrong, or trying to prevent them from happening in the first place. And we made, for example, a design decision really early on when Twitter started to host photos. I for your watchers, keep in mind that the way that this went in my life was Twitter decides Twitter is text only. Okay, that's I can hang with that.
Mhm.
Twitter is now hosting photos. Okay. Okay, well, at least it's
Mm.
not video. Twitter has acquired Vine and is now
Mm.
doing 6-second loops of live video. Okay, well, at least it's not live. Twitter has acquired Periscope, the
I
live
still
video
remember that day.
streaming service.
Yeah,
What's next? Like, I
right.
was really trying to figure out, were
Mhm.
we just gonna like go meet in public or something? Like, what's gonna be the next thing they do to me? But I remember that as we were talking about hosting photos, there was this question of EXIF data. What do we do with it? The original idea was like, "Oh, we'll just leave it all intact, and then, people can do whatever they want with like logging the photographer, the camera, whatever, right? And I said, hey, that's assuming a level of understanding of EXIF data that is way more comprehensive than the vast majority of people who use Twitter to upload photos are going to have. They don't know that potentially their latitude and longitude is embedded in the photo as data. So I said, we're going to strip it all out. If we strip it out, then that as a potential vector for abuse, for harassment, for stalking doesn't exist. And down the road, we actually saw instances where when that didn't get stripped, it ran into problems, not on Twitter, but for example, I believe that it was a photo where the reporter did not remove the
Mm.
EXIF data that revealed where John McAfee was back when he was on the run. And it was the reporting out about him being on the run that actually revealed where his location was, which was a
Fascinating.
fascinating
Yeah.
thing to see.
So many good kind of moments like that to reflect back on, because when you're planning for those moments, like you said, Twitter had the foresight to make that decision, and when you're inside, you have to illustrate how it could go wrong, right? You have to paint a picture. I have a hypothesis how it could go wrong. It's not always pleasant, or like at times even harmful, right? To see it reflected in real life, but it's really kind of interesting to kind of then have something happen in real life and kind of learn even more from it. Pivoting a little bit, you mentioned building your team at Twitter and going from levels and sizes of magnitude from before I was there and into even after I had left. When you're hiring for trust and safety leaders, what sort of principles do you tap into? What sort of things do you look for? There are probably folks out there who are looking to build and grow their careers. Share a little bit on kind of what you look for.
I mean, if I'm hiring somebody who's going to run an org or run a pillar of an org, then we're going to assume that they have a reasonable level of subject matter expertise. And then after that, the first things that I look for is how much do they care? How much do they care about this challenge? Are they passionate about trying to make it better? Are they
Mm.
curious about what new things could be tried or what changes could be made? And you get so far when you empower people who are passionate about trying to have an impact on a problem to work on that problem. And it's just something where if you're coming in to do just your work, clock in, clock out, and you don't really care about the work itself. You're just going through the motions and you may be doing a fine job. That's fine. Probably not for the leader
Mm.
of that part of the org. You want people to feel as though they are working for someone who cares about the work they're doing.
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
think I would look for that.
that makes a lot of sense. I think building on that, one of the things that I felt from you at Twitter was a lot of trust. So I remember
And
the
safety.
first. Well done. So I remember the first week I was there. So I come from the federal government, so suit and tie to MacBook and tight jeans, and come east from DC to San Francisco. One of the things that I have really that has served me well, that is basically a foundational, really try to understand what your leader is about, what they're trying to achieve, and really help them achieve it. That's like where I tend to start from, whether I'm at Thorn, Twitter, or wherever. And so I remember the first day, on the job, I'm writing you a note because I want to get a sense of like, hey, what are we about? What does Dell want to achieve? And you gave some like appropriate, like high level frame, but your reframe back to me was, well, I was hoping you would tell me what you want to achieve for us. And for me, that was a big pivot for me of like, oh, okay, as someone who's give a crap, we'll call it, give a crap quotient is high. To your point, really, really formed this like nice recipe for me to then take it to another level of how do I bring in everything that I've learned, apply it to these principles and foundational points of what trust and safety was at Twitter, and start to build that plan out. And so over the years, developed a lot of trust with you. What sort of things need to be in place, especially in trust and safety, at the speed and scale that we're all working at. So just give an example, right? Like something terrible could happen at 2 a.m. and I'm woken up and hopefully you're asleep. And it's like, I have to make these decisions really quickly. That takes obviously a lot of trust. You can't be the answer woman every single hour of the day, especially at the size and speed. What things need to be in place from a trust and safety team in order to have the trust, have the ability to make decisions quickly?
I think maybe one of the biggest things that needs to be in place for that to succeed is if I'm the manager and the other person is reporting to me and I'm tapping them to make these decisions, they have to feel like it's going to be okay with me if they don't get it right. We'll fix it. We'll do what we can. And if you feel as though if you get this call wrong, I'm going to be furious, or you're going to have failed everyone, or you're going to have let down this entire country. Like, that's not really a situation where you're going to be able to make your best decision. And I think it was really important to me that people in the org knew that I would have their back, that if something went down, if something went wrong, I would work with them to figure it out. We would do everything we could to make it right. And also, like, sometimes mistakes are going to happen. The wrong call is going to get made. A call is going to get made that seemed right, but at the time, but it turned out to be wrong with new information that came in.
A safer internet doesn't happen by accident. It takes dedicated people and purpose built solutions. That's where Safer comes in. Built by child safety technology experts using predictive AI and proprietary hash matching, Safer helps detect child sexual abuse material and exploitation at scale. Platforms like Blue Sky, Stability.ai, and Vimeo rely on Safer to proactively detect online sexual harms against children. Want to learn how you can put Safer to work on your platform? Visit safer.io. So one of the things, Dell, that we talked about hiring, you talked about building a team, and then it's growing and nurturing leaders. One of the things that I think was certainly true of our team at Twitter, and is certainly been my experience on leading teams in other capacities, is that generally you want a diverse team of diverse backgrounds, expertise. It also brings with a sense of diverse styles. What will motivate? What will drive? What will demotivate? How do you navigate, especially looking back on our team at Twitter? You have very vastly different personalities that all, combine together, kind of make this beautiful kind of recipe. But as the leader, you have to navigate that. You have to apply different tactics to different types of humans. How do you get a sense for like what will motivate John? What will drive this or that for another person? How do you consider that again at the size and speed of scale?
I mean, that's something where that year giving psych testing to reality TV show applicants really comes in handy. Now, more seriously, you ask, like, have conversations with people. Hey, I think you're doing a really great job. Do you know that? Do you feel like I feel that way? Are you getting that feedback from me? And I've had people say, like, actually, I don't feel like I'm getting enough positive feedback from you. I'm like, all right, then I know that that's something that you really value. So I will make sure I am more explicit in that. And other people, well, I feel seen and acknowledged when I get tapped to do these kinds of projects. Cool. I'll keep that in mind. I'll see if I can give you opportunities to those types of projects. Like, it's astonishing at times how much you can find out by just asking people what makes them feel motivated and happy and successful and what makes them want to keep doing the work.
It really can be that simple. I completely agree.
It's like the overlooked shortcut.
Right, right.
Like, people do all these
They
different
jump through
approaches that are
hoops.
super
Yes.
complicated and, like, I'm going to test out this feedback
Right.
style and see if they respond better, but they didn't actually just sit down and be like, "Hey, how do you prefer your feedback over email?" Or I've even had conversations with people like, "Hey, do you want feedback in the moment or do you want it
Right.
later in written form so you can process it, or, like, how do you wanna receive that?" And people have different preferences.
Something really is beautiful about aligning expectations, whether it's about how you get feedback or a conversation with a colleague or a partner. It's really important. So, one of the things that, from my experience, so there was a time at Twitter where you went on leave and I took over a portion of your role responsibility. And that was next level for me, that in a lot of ways. But one of the ways that it was is it was lonely. So your peer group shrinks, and you're in these conversations, and you're the leader of the organization and have to show up this way. Being in your role for over a decade, I can only imagine. What do you do to take care of yourself from like a wellness perspective?
Well, then I did when I was actually doing the work, I did the opposite of what I made everybody else do. Like I had, I made sure that we had counselors on site and that there were these resources available.
Mhm.
And also, I was like, I'm going to prioritize the people who are doing the work directly. I'm going to prioritize, I got to go do this other stuff. So I really do a ton of self care during the time. I spent pretty much all of my waking hours working, it felt like. And I think it felt that way because it was that way. What really helped me understand that it was time for me to step back from my role was I had gone on a sabbatical in 2021 because my older kid was going to be going into kindergarten. She was going to be going to her first summer camps, and I wanted to make sure that I was there for her.
Mm.
And my kids, like, just how kids do things that just are absolutely stabs in the heart and they don't realize it all. My
Oh
kids had
yeah.
this game they liked to play. It was called Work. And when
Ooh.
they went to work, they would take headphones and put them on and then go in this cardboard rocket ship that I had built them and then type furiously on a keyboard. So then they would come out and be like, "Hey kids, I've got a break for the next 30 minutes. If you want to, oh, sorry, I need to hop on this call real fast, but I should be
Mm,
off soon."
mm.
And I was just like, "Oh, daggers in my heart. My gosh, you guys are milking this." And I was like, I can't fully be there for my oldest in this time that she was really stressed about if I'm also thinking about the call that I need to get to in 20 minutes, if I'm also thinking about this other thing that I need to be doing, if I'm thinking about the next meeting. So I was like, I need to be able to give more of my time and energy to my kids for at least this period of their lives. And to do the role that I was doing, that needed all of my time and energy too.
Yeah, the math
And
didn't.
unfortunately, yeah, the math was not mathin',
No.
as they say.
Certainly can relate to at least a version, right? My own reality of kind of that story, and I'm often reflecting back on moments where I wasn't taking care of myself, where I wasn't taking care of those who I love, in a way that really made me proud, and yet feel very lucky and fortunate to be able to do so now. And so I love all the things that you're doing.
And since my kids aren't going to hear this for probably at least a while, I'll tell you one other thing that I've been doing
Okay,
that's
sure. What?
been tremendously beneficial to my mental health. My kids like walk from the car to school and from school to the car and stuff like that. I ended up doing a bulk purchase of gemstones, like
Okay.
polished rocks,
Yeah.
and I started hiding them all along the walkway to and from the school. And it's
Wow.
been now, I think, yeah, 4 years of doing it, and the kids have so many rumors, like, the younger ones are like, "It's the rock fairy," the older ones are like, "There's a secret treasure that's gonna be discovered." Like, it's just this everybody has theories and, like, nobody totally knows what's happening, but you see these kids coming out of school just booking it to go look for rocks. And the
Wow.
parents, like, the first time that their kids are scrambling for rocks, they're like, "What are you expecting to find?" Then their kid comes up with, like, some big piece of, like, polished amethyst, and they're like, "What in the world is happening?" And that is really
It's pretty great.
gratifying, John.
It's pretty great. It's pretty great. Speaking of great, you have a really an eye for finding trust and safety pros that have taken, let's say, a more winding route to the field, which I think has created a lot of benefit and value, and certainly, diversity of background and understanding of certain harm types or how certain things work. Now that trust and safety continues to become more of a formalized field or role, how do you see that evolving at all?
I think a lot depends on what hiring managers look for, or what hiring managers prioritize. I will tell you that in my experience and from my point of view, looking for people, again, who are passionate about the topic, who have subject matter expertise, regardless of how they gained it. Like the one thing that I can tell you for sure was never a factor in hiring was where you had gotten your degree from. I didn't care. I wanted to know if you knew what you were talking about and if you cared about it. And if you did, I wanted to see if there was a way we could work together to try to make things better. And I think even as theoretically there are these areas of trust and safety that are becoming more structured, that are becoming more codified, there are new areas springing up on a daily basis that are the same sort of wild gray areas that we were dealing with umpteen years ago because a new version of the situation is manifested. And now it's actually playing out in a different way with different outcomes. So now you have to deal with those outcomes. And I think that there is actually a risk in some ways if you get too over dependent on this is the structured realm of
Yeah.
what falls within trust and safety and nothing else shall enter, then you're going to miss stuff.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really interesting. I completely agree with you, and it's still going to be really interesting to see where it evolves. One thing that I think you had mentioned, again, this quote from a friend that connected you, I think, to potentially the role at Twitter. Of when I think of bad things on the internet, I think of you. And I think that most people would maybe make an assumption that Dell is a negative thinker. She's a pessimist. Knowing you a little bit, I don't think that could be further from the truth. But can you share a little bit about what I feel like is a common trait amongst trust and safety pros of this eternal optimism, but somehow we have the ability to think in worst case scenarios? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit of hope for the best, prepare for the worst,
Mm.
right?
I still say trust but verify. I still
Yep.
use that.
And I think that in a lot of ways, to care about trust and safety, you have to care about people. You have to want to make things better. You want to try to help. And if you care about people and you want to make things better for people, you can't really be a pessimist
Mm,
at your core because then what would the point be of all of that? You kind of have to have that deep and abiding belief that like good things can come and good things can come. We've seen good things come from people coming together and working together on things. And in situations where we can empower and enable those sorts of net positive impacts, like why wouldn't we want?
let's get through a few quick ones real fast. I'm curious to get your thoughts on these. Putting on your coaching hat, what sort of is like some fundamental or maybe some common advice that you give to trust and safety leaders?
Well, one piece of advice that I have consistently given to trust and safety leaders, and you may recall it, is do you remember the last time you bought new socks?
I wasn't sure this
Because
would come up, but I'm sure glad that it has.
it's true. When was the last time you bought yourself new socks? And then you go
J-
and get new socks and you put them on and you're like, "Oh my god, my feet are in a fluffy wonderland. Like this is so comfortable compared to these threadbare ones with holes in them."
Yeah.
People forget. So
Wha-
I have
yeah.
consistently given that advice.
This is true. This is true. This is true.
I would say other advice that is maybe less sock oriented,
Mhm.
uh, has been around things like it's really important to remember, and you should remember this even if you don't think it's true, that when things happen at the company that aren't the things you wanted to have happen, it doesn't mean that it was necessarily targeted at you. It's
Mm,
not that you failed. It's not that you are being punished or they don't like you. There's a decision being made about the business. Maybe the wrong
yeah.
decision. There may be better ways that you could advocate for it to not happen, but it's not directed at like you as a person. It's not meant as as a rebuke of you and what you have done generally. And
Yeah,
even if it is, it doesn't do you any good to think that way.
this is the shadow side of caring a lot.
Mhm.
What is the biggest misconception about the field?
I think actually the biggest misconception that is that can also be a trap that people do fall into and make it not a misconception is, oh, they're the team that always says no. They never want to let people do X. They never want to let people do Y. And it can be really easy to when like a product manager comes to you and says, "Hey, we've got this idea for this new thing. It's called the Chainsaw Face Ripper 3000." And you're like, "Oh my god, that's a terrible idea. Like,
Right,
what are you shouldn't say that."
right.
Instead, it's like, "Tell me what you're hoping to achieve with the
Tell me more.
Chainsaw Face Ripper 3000. I'd love to
Exactly.
understand what the goal is here. Like, let's think about ways we can maybe get to that goal without it being called the Chainsaw Face Ripper 3000." Like, I think there might be some challenges around uptake with that and, framing things to make it so it's not adversarial. It's
Mm,
collaborative. You're trying to help them get to their outcome or the best version of their outcome the best possible way. And maybe it takes a little more work up front, but in the end,
yeah.
they'll get to miss all of these other painful things they would have otherwise had to deal with.
What does that work up front look like? In this instance, you're talking about, I'm assuming, talking about working with product managers and the business with respect to their plans with the roadmap or features. So what does that upfront work look like?
Giving commitments around essentially like operating agreements. Like
Yeah.
we're not going to launch new features if we don't have the tools to actually enforce our policies or rules on those features. Trying to avoid the really unfortunate situation that sometimes crops up of companies that are trying to do trust and safety by having policies against things, but having no real mechanisms of enforcement or any ability to scale them or thought toward how that's going to work or happen. And I think that that's a trap that people
Mhm.
fall into pretty easily.
You're also the board member of, or a board member of the Trust and Safety Professionals Association. The role of civil society broadly over the last 10 to 15 years has been really important to the field, but also to the internet. Thorn, of course, is a nonprofit. How can nonprofits like Thorn continue to add value to the discourse, add value to certain harms that different groups care about and are trying to work with technology companies, with policymakers, and also folks in civil society to make progress against them?
I think that one of the things that Thorn does very well is very similar to kind of what I just said, in that if Thorn hears that the company is going to release the Chainsaw Face Ripper 3000 and their response is, "That's a terrible idea," you're already setting yourself up for an adversarial relationship. So I think, again, it comes back to really trying to establish truly collaborative relationships where there isn't sort of more drag being put on the nonprofit or the company outside of like, yes, we agree that this would be additional burden that we would carry, but it makes sense because it's going to allow us to have all of this impact. But understanding that there may be these pain points along the way where an outsider or somebody who doesn't work at the company may look at it at an idea or a concept and be like, "That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard of. It won't fix it at all. Why are you
Mm,
wasting your time on that when you could do this instead?" And the answer may be like, "Look, the thing that you don't think will have any impact, we think will at least have some impact on this many people. The thing that you want to do, if we did that, it would take us 2 years to build it and roll it out. This we can get out this quarter. We think we should at least make progress." But that's a really hard conversation to have because so many times companies make that promise and then don't go back and actually make progress. So it's a really, really complicated balance. I think a lot depends on the trust you build with the people you're working with. Again,
Yeah.
like I think that making sure that it's really clear what priorities are, what efforts should be prioritized over others, how you're using your resources, why. Like those are conversations that are really helpful in making sure that that there isn't the misconception that the team just doesn't care.
Del, you're an absolute legend. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. It's been a lot of fun. I knew it was going to be fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I truly wish you nothing but the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
To our listeners, thanks for being part of the conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you want even more from today's guest, be sure to check out our lightning round Q&A session on YouTube.